So far there's one gun in my collection that I regret buying. It's the M&P Shield. Now, I know this gun has a huge following with people swearing by it being the king of concealed carry pistols, and we'll get into that later in the video, but for some background real quick, I live in California where we have something called a handgun roster. For those who don't know, it's essentially a list of handguns approved for sale in the state of California. I actually made a whole video about it if you guys want to check that out, but because of the roster, our options for micro compact pistols for concealed carry were pretty limited at the time. Back then, I was carrying a Glock 19, Gen 3 of course, which was great and all, but I was looking for something smaller, something easier to conceal and more comfortable to carry for a long period. That's when I came across the M&P Shield that I ended up carrying for a few months before switching over to the P365. Now, I'll be honest, I've been trying to get rid of this gun for a while now. I've offered it to family and friends, but I didn't want to be a dick about it, so anytime they asked why I was selling it, I'd explain my personal issues with the gun, which of course usually turned them off from buying it, and honestly, I don't blame them. I wasn't gonna lie and say, yeah, this gun's great, you'll enjoy shooting it, when I didn't even enjoy training with it myself. So, that said, I want to be fair, so before I get into the issues I had with this gun, let me first talk about the few things I actually liked about it. The look. I actually like the way the gun looks. It's definitely something different, especially coming from a Glock. I didn't want something with a similar shape. I wanted to explore the very few other options we had, and something about the design of the shield just really stood out to me. It's a micro compact yet slightly thick pistol with a polymer frame and metal slide, giving it a lightweight but durable feel. Now, the slimness of the grip was definitely a huge factor into why I bought it. Compared to the Glock I was carrying at the time, the difference in grip is pretty noticeable, which made it really good for concealment due to its short, slim grip. I never really struggled to conceal carry this gun. Now, apart from all that, there is really not much else I can say I liked about the shield. I guess if you want to throw in the neon iron sights that it came with, those really help to pick up and get on target fast. Okay, now let's move on to the issues that ultimately turned me off from training and carrying it as my CCW. Which, keep in mind, some of these issues I had are obviously based on my personal experience, and I understand may not apply to everyone. I'll also be bringing up some of the most common complaints people have had with the shield. So, with that said, let's just get right into it. Starting off with the grip. One thing I'll say again, I really like the slimness of the grip. However, what I don't like is how wide and thick the grip is. For reference, I have what I consider medium-sized hands, and for some reason the shield grip just never sat well with me. It always felt a bit uncomfortable, especially when held tightly. Now, another issue people often bring up with the grip is the bottom of the mag well, which I can testify to this. Because of the slimness design, it does sometimes make it hard to insert mags, especially when trying to reload quickly. Then you have the safety and how difficult it is to operate. Now, this didn't really affect me personally when I carried because, well, I never really kept the safety on. However, I did notice it's quite hard to disengage. The safety is also very small and blends into the gun, which doesn't help either if you're someone that carries with a manual safety. Now, this next issue is something I've personally never experienced, and I've shot in this gun plenty of times. It has to do with the trigger safety. The problem occurs when you try to pull the trigger from high up. Since the bottom of the trigger safety hasn't been engaged, the trigger won't move, preventing the gun from firing. Now, the reason I think I've never ran into this issue is because how much of my index finger I use. You'll see in the demonstration that the more of your index finger you place on the trigger, the more likely you are to run into this problem. And I'm not saying that people that have experienced this issue are jamming their entire finger into the trigger guard, because I can also see this happening with people with wider index fingers. Now again, I've shot and trained with this gun plenty of times, and I personally have never came across this. Now, since we're talking about the trigger, let me say this. I, along many other shield owners I've met, really dislike the trigger. People often mention the false reset and the lack of a crisp feel, which is replaced with some grittiness. Now, look, this isn't a huge deal. This is just a personal preference. I feel the same way about Glock triggers, which is why I replaced the trigger on my Glock 19 with the Apex trigger, which was originally my plan for the M&P Shield until I realized how much work it takes to change out the trigger. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to design it, so you basically have to dismantle the entire gun just to swap out the trigger. It's insane. The videos showing, this process are around 30 minutes long, but realistically, it'll probably take about an hour. Okay, now let's talk about the magazine, because there are two main issues people bring up, one of them being a huge reason why I moved away from the shield. The first is the magazine not sitting properly. As you see, when you try to insert a loaded magazine, you often run into the problem of it not sitting all the way, requiring you to smack it into place. Now, while I was doing some drills, you'll see that this isn't that big of an issue. When you're out of ammo, your slide should lock back, making it easier to insert the magazine. But if you're like me, the way you grip your gun can sometimes cause you to accidentally press the mag release, which prevents the slide from locking back. But even then, it's not that difficult to insert the magazine, smack it, and rack around into the chamber. Is it annoying? Sure, but overall, that was not a deal breaker for me. I'll say something like capacity, which was a huge factor for me and ultimately led me to switch over to the P365. At best with the Shield, you're carrying 16+1, or in my case, when I wanted a bit more concealment, I'd use the 7-round mag, giving me 15+1. Now, most Shield owners know about or have at least heard about mag guts extension springs, which allow you to convert your 8-round mags into 10-round mags. Honestly, if I knew about these sooner, I might have stuck with the Shield a bit longer. Now, of course, there are some concern about these springs. So far, I've only seen positive reviews, but people often mention having a hard time inserting rounds and the possibility of reliability issues down the line. Again, I haven't seen any negative reviews about this, but those are the two main concerns I've heard about. So if you're someone who uses these, feel free to share your experience down below. Now, last on my list of cons, and honestly, if I had to say the main reason why I trained so little with the Shield, would have to be because of recoil. Now, understand this was my first micro compact pistol, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I believed all the reviews saying, yeah, there's a little bit of muzzle flip, but nothing out of the ordinary. They'll show themselves shooting at like 60 yards, and I thought, oh, the recoil's not that bad. Well, guess what? It is that bad. Now, you'll notice I can control the recoil pretty well. I've taken it through different distances all the way out to 30 yards, and I'm decently accurate with it. But back when I was carrying it, it was a complete different story, which, if I'm being honest, it all came down to my lack of training. I was terrible with the gun because I didn't practice enough. Sure, I would go out, shoot a few rounds at 3 to 7 yards and call it a day. I pretty much had no confidence with this gun beyond 7 yards. And sure, some people, myself included, try to justify that by saying, well, that's far enough for most situations you'll ever face. Says who? Statistics? Maybe. But for me, it just didn't sit well knowing I couldn't shoot accurately at what I consider reasonable distances, which back then I didn't know exactly how far those distances were. I just knew I should have been able to hit my target from there, and I wasn't. Turns out it was around 15 to 25 yards. Now, of course, a lot has changed these days, and I can shoot confidently with the Shield at distances up to 30 yards. But that's only because of the time I've spent training with my P365. When I first got the P365, I was disappointed all over again. The recoil issue came back, and I realized that if I wanted to carry something of this size, I was going to have to commit some serious time into training with it. So that's exactly what I did. I hit the reset, I went back to basics and relearned how to properly grip these micro compact pistols. I spent time practicing my trigger pull both at the range and home, and all that training made the difference in my ability to handle and shoot these guns effectively. So when I first thought about making this video, it had been a while since I touched the Shield. All I could remember were the bad experience I had with this gun. But when I actually took it out to shoot, I realized I was hitting all my shots, which was a huge relief, and it made me understand that all the time I spent training with micro compact pistols has paid off. A lot of the frustration and hesitation I felt about shooting this gun is gone now. In fact, it's actually brought me some joy because it showed me just how far I've come from when I first started shooting handguns to where I am today. Which brings us all back to the question, is the Shield still the king of concealed carry pistols? I'd have to say no. I know some people may not like that answer, but it's 2025 with all the options available like the P365, the Hellcat, the Glock 26, or even newer variations of the Shield like the Shield Plus, which offer more capacity, better trigger, and overall improved features. It's hard to say the original Shield still holds that title. Now, am I saying the original Shield is bad for concealed carry? Absolutely not. For its time, it was groundbreaking technology. But would I recommend it to someone as a CCW in 2025? Maybe, for one reason alone, the price. You can often find these on consignment for around $250 to $300, which is a great deal, especially for someone who's in need of a reliable concealed carry weapon in the meantime. So this alone is why I can't discourage anyone from picking up this gun and using it as an everyday carry today. So that's all I gotta say. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe. Also, I'm not entirely sure. I was thinking of doing one last drill showing the M&P Shield for the last time. Now, it's not that I'm getting rid of this gun. I think I've changed my mind on that and will be keeping it for the meantime. But if you want to see some CCW drills in the future, make sure to check out my Instagram at ShadowTheWicked. Also, if you guys want to get in contact with me, that's a great place. But other than that, hope you guys have a good weekend. Stay safe and God bless.